Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another Lab podcast. Today, Kel and I have a special guest, Jason Theobald, who happens to be my coach and mentor. So super happy to have him come on here and talk with us about his wealth of knowledge when it comes to functional health and nutrition. So yeah, Jason, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Could you kind of give a little bit of a background about yourself and, how you got here?
Sure. My name's Jason Theobald. Let's see. I own Scooby Prep, soon to be Scooby Health. We're having a little rebranding just to kind of, encompass everything we do. Prep it stands for prep. And so we're more than that. And it just kind of evolved over time. So Scooby Health. And I do a lot of functional work. I still do prep work. I post them every here and there. And they all look great, but my business has moved more towards functional health and kind of people that have had problems maybe from the industry and over dieting, and you're doing a lot of shows. But how I got here, I've been in the business a long time. I've been competing since 2002. I have my IFBB Pro card in Classic Physique. Did pretty well. I think I did 6 shows, like 4 top 5s, top 2, and then a laid an egg in my last show, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. And so I have that background. Studied under Dr. Charles Sefcek for my functional, plus my main mentor is Vince Pitstick, who I think is the best in the functional space. He's the guy that brought functional to the fitness and blended it and then taught me. And I guess I was kind of the first meathead to kind of cross over from macros and prove that you could convert someone like me. That's kind of where I'm at. And now I offer mentorships, group mentorships to teach functional. I've got a team of about 11 coaches under me. And I think that's about it. If there's anything else you want to know, just ask.
Awesome. So our listeners might not know kind of what functional health is. Can you give us like a little bit of kind of just the high level blurb about like what we're talking about to set some stage?
So in functional nutrition and health, you're really looking at, number one, you treat the body as a system as a whole. Whereas allopathic medicine, you got someone for gastroenterologist, you've got someone for endocrinology, you've got someone, for the heart, like all these things are treated separate. When functional nutrition, you look at the whole systems as a whole and how that affects the body, because they all feed off of each other. If your adrenals are down, you're probably going to have thyroid hormone down regulation. If your adrenals are down, you might have hormone down regulation. So we look to find the root cause of what is causing that, rather than treat it or address it one by one. So it's really getting to the root cause of the issue. And most of these are lifestyle diseases. It's how you're living your life, how that's expressing your genes and things like that. Obviously cancer, you go allopathic medicine. Got PCOS, coming to a functional health coach, honestly, is probably one of the best ways to handle it. It's a lifestyle disease. So that's really where functional nutrition shines.
Yeah. Love that. When we're talking about, cause you were in the bodybuilding and still are for so long. And now you're kind of focusing on the lifestyle folks. Do you see a lot of overlap in that, or like bodybuilding turning into having lifestyle issues in the later in life and that kind of thing?
I do. And I see it more in women, just because, the female body is less made to be at these low body fat percentages of people that are trying to get on stage or even just, push to the limits. And so we see it more there. But I've had to help men too with functional issues. I have a couple men that have SIBO and different things like that. So their guts are a wreck, from all of these pushing the meats and the, 10 ounces of this, 10 ounces of that, which is just old school crap. But mainly I'm dealing with women who have been submersed in diet culture. Do more, eat less. And if it's not working, do more, eat less again, and rinse and repeat until that is making them gain weight. And then they're like, what the hell? And then they go see a doctor, they take their labs and, they don't really run everything you need. They do a CBC, a CMP, they're not dying. So it looks fine. And they tell them they're fine. They got to deal with it. And then they end up finally at my door after a couple coaches feed them up, make them fatter because they really don't know what they're doing. And then I have a mess that I get to deal with, but I know how to do it and I systematically approach. And that's really where my bread and butter is at this point in time.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Did you have something,
I
Cody?
don't know. I was going to say, do you think that you end up having more female clients just because, the hormone system is so much more complex than males, or what do you think is like the leading cause
I
of
think
that?
it's deeper than that. I mean, there is, a little bit more complexity where progesterone, estradiol, and testosterone all have to work together, whereas men, it's mainly their test and estradiol. But I also just think that stress affects females' endocrine system harder than it does men. Men get stress, and it kills like the cardiovascular system over time. Women, it seems to affect the endocrine and the hormonal system a little harder. So I think that's just the differences between the bodies. So that's how I see it and why I think it is.
With so I'm sure Cody is trans, and I'm also trans, and I just kind of curious, do you, because I know you also worked with Alex or are working with Alex, and is there a lot of complications? Are we just kind of like being kind of in the in-between, biologically speaking, with how our systems work, and depending on like if you're a bodybuilder and whatnot, do you see a lot of differences in how our endocrine systems and our bodies work?
It's a great question, and one that I think needs to be addressed more. Early on in transition, yes. So when I worked with Alex at first, his body behaved still a little bit more like a female's would. I couldn't feed him as much protein. But as he built muscle and became more and more mesomorphic, and his body took more and more of the testosterone, his body started to behave more like a male's. So I could feed him more protein. He didn't need that progesterone anymore. He was very androgen dominant, so we didn't have to worry about the pool between progesterone and estradiol. It became more like a man system where the progesterone drops out, and as long as we're staying more androgen dominant, we're good. So the more further along, I believe someone goes, and I think that going into bodybuilding as a transgender is really a good idea because you build that muscle, and I think it helps you push more and more till that male side, till your body behaves like a male. Now, because of the digestive tract, it still curves more, and so you're going to have more constipation issues. So you're still going to have to deal with that because of the birth making organs are still it's not as a straight shoot basically. And so you do have more constipation issues. But other than that, as that muscle starts to build, and, especially as a bodybuilder, usually, to transition, I mean, if you guys want to share it, but usually the doses of test are anywhere from like 60 to 80 milligrams a week. Well, once people get into the bodybuilding scene and they want that muscle, I mean, we're pushing the testosterone up. So as that androgen gets higher and higher and that muscle comes on, I don't see that down regulation of that hormonal system. The body behaves more male as it becomes more like a male.
Yeah. Cool.
Is that what you guys are doing, or?
Yeah. And I would say also probably even post like hysterectomy and stuff like that. I feel like that would probably make a difference, even digestive wise, because you probably
freeing up space.
Yeah. Exactly.
100%. You're freeing up space. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a very good question, though.
I think the other thing that can get kind of confusing is when it comes to labs, do you still think that we should be using, female ranges, or is it okay for them to give us like male ranges? Because I know when it comes to things like creatinine and stuff like that, it's if they put me in like a female range, my creatinine looks really, really awful. So it's just like there's little things where it's like, do they still measure how they used to, or do they move to other?
I personally tell my clients in your shoes and your listeners who have shoes who are trans to get a male panel. Mm-hmm. That's what I do. Because I want the progesterone to be looked at those ranges, not with, the luteal and all these different things on there. And you know what? I think it's still a developing science. Maybe we'll find out that certain have to be still looked at a female range and others can be. but I think it's too early to 100% say. So, I could be on a podcast in 5 years and say, oh, I wasn't completely right. I don't know. But what I do right now is I just have the male panel run.
Yeah. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense because what I always go with is when coaching people, and I don't deal with a lot of the blood stuff. I'm more high level things, but once you start seeing like beard hair and voice drop, all those kind of like male characteristics that are so controlled by all this stuff, it's pretty cut and dry, in my opinion.
Yep. That's how I see it too. Like I said, it's just more as the transition unfolds, the body's going to behave more male. And that's what it's doing. So that's how I see labs should be monitored. But I do think it is a developing science. And I think that maybe some point in time, certain values will need to be still looked at. But at this point in time, I think we're all bodybuilders are always scientists on themselves. And I think anyone who is trans and is under a doctor care taking the 60 or 80 and then finally says, you know what, this really don't have my beard where I want it. This don't have my shoulders where I want it. I'm going all in. I mean, that is an experiment in a right? I mean, but that's what bodybuilders do. Yep. So I think we're still trying to learn, and I hope that doesn't offend anyone, but I think we're all still trying to learn and figure it out when you push past what the medical community is willing to dose.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And I know like some guys are older when they transition, and I know that's going to play a role in that also, because like, so if you're haven't gone through all the way through female puberty, like you're kind of like a newborn still, and like there's a lot of things you don't have to undo, right? And so once you're a little older, even past 30, it's going to look a lot different than when you're young and do it.
Yes, you get patched when you're young. Yeah, I agree.
So absolutely. So when I think, what are some of the hot topics that you hear a lot in lifestyle people that maybe are having those kinds of issues? They can't tell if it's like a hormonal thing, a functional thing, or if they're just not finding the right plan or the right level of intensity. Do you have any kind of fast and hard ways that you can tell that something's like going on?
Yeah. So for me, I use a couple of forms. So when people, come to me, generally speaking on my, on the website, they can choose like functional nutrition. They can choose weight loss resistance, where it's, I'm going to put them in a really intensified program. But I have some forms, and there's some telltale signs that, definitely some functional things are going wrong. I mean, if you have really bad gut health, constantly bloated, gas, constipation, and or diarrhea, or both, that's a telltale sign that, there's something probably going on metabolically speaking, as well. People that have a lot of fatigue, they're not recovering well from their training. People that aren't getting a pump anymore, that's a problem. And you're getting more and more towards weight loss resistance. Anxiety, especially in females. If anxiety drops out and estrogen is still the dominant hormone, that's going to cause anxiety. And so a lot of people are going to have anxiety. And as you stress, the body favors cortisol over progesterone. So it drops out. And now you're highly estrogen dominant, and then you don't sleep well either. So you'll see that in people. What else? Like the immune system in overdrive, like a lot of histamine response, eyes, throat, all these things, skin. You'll see a lot of rashes. You'll see acne flaring up. All these things are signs of imbalance inside the body. As people get older and they take hormones, and then they think, oh, I'm going to lose weight, and they don't. Well, now you have hormone resistance, and that's more when the cells are so inflamed, the receptors on them aren't talking to the hormones. So they think they get on this HRT, and all of a sudden they're going to lose their weight, and they're going to be like they were, and they still can't. And then they're shaking their head like, man, I thought this was going to work. So that's a telltale sign that there's stuff going on. So I kind of really assess the whole body. I do something called an MSQ, metabolic stress questionnaire. I do a really in-depth gut questionnaire. And then if I think they need it, I have a severe weight loss resistance form. And a lot of things I just told you are on there. And if they have like 5 or 6 of those, I say, listen, you got to go in my top program. And I take care of it in that way. So
awesome. Did you have some, Cody? No.
I was just gonna say, could you? So I've gotten a few applications that will say like the weight loss resistance on it, and I think people who submit inquiries saying that don't really know what it means, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm resistant to weight loss because I just can't seem to stick to something." Can you like kind of define what weight loss resistance is and what it might look like? And it's not just, "Oh fuck, I can't stick to my plan," that kind of thing.
No. So weight loss resistance is people who are usually engulfed in diet culture. They don't have to be competitors, but they have dieted their whole life, yo-yoed. And many of these women finally found it the best way is just to eat low calorie, 1,400, 1,200, 1,300. And for years, this worked for them. And, they probably over-exercised, a lot of spin, a lot of HIIT, a lot of running, a lot of training, 5-6 days a week. And yeah, that works for a very long time. But then over time, as they do that, they lose muscle. And then maybe they have some slip ups and they eat it extra because they're so done with it. And then they gain more fat, then muscle comes back. Now they're less efficient. And this cycle repeats. So it's losing muscle with these low calorie overtraining, putting back on fat when they finally need a break. And they're getting less efficient every time. And so when they go back into what used to work, it's no longer working. And then what do? They do more and they eat less. Well, guess what? Now they get puffy and some weight comes on. Or every time they have a free meal, it sticks. They've lost all metabolic resiliency. So these are not people that go out all weekend and drink and can't follow a damn plan for a week. Those are your general lifestyle clients. And if they would buckle down with a coach, they're fine. They'll lose. These are people that have been at this shit for years and they've just bombarded their body and nothing's working. And so, I ask, have you been with multiple coaches? Yeah. Well, what happened? Well, they fed me up and I gained more weight. Okay. Been to the doctor a lot? Yeah, I went. They said there's nothing wrong. They can't help me. They tell me it's my age. Those are all telltale signs to me that you have weight loss resistance. But, if you're 25 and you're in the party scene and you eat like a donkey, no, you just need lifestyle habits. So, yeah, there's a complete difference of what's going on here. And so it's a very, very real thing. And it's one of those things because diet culture has been around for the last 20, 30 years. It's now rearing its ugly head. And there's so many people in this position. And I get applications daily on it. And I can't take everyone. So my price is expensive because I just can't take everyone. But it's you're going to see more and more of it as fallout from diet culture. Going about it that way is obviously the wrong way. You need to be in a slight surplus, training hard, eating well. That's how you build a body. And then occasionally, if you want to dip into a certain deficit for certain occasions, back into the surplus. That's not what was being taught, and that's not what was happening. We're waking up to it, but that's what weight loss resistance is.
Well, and when you – sorry, Cody, I'm going to interrupt you.
No, go for it.
So that just makes me think of – because last week we talked about functional fitness is that buzzword of everybody thinks that CrossFit is. Yeah. And that's exactly the result of what you're talking about. And it's just crazy to me because I think – once someone puts the word functional in front of something that's such a buzzword nowadays, which is very different from what you're talking about, but I feel like people like to throw it in there just to say, "Oh, this is cool, not bodybuilding," kind of thing. And and I feel like it's just leading people astray. It's all just freaking marketing, and it makes it so frustrating. Sorry, yeah. It was a rant.
Oh, you're fine. I mean, it's well aimed. I mean, I don't hate CrossFit, but I'll tell you, a lot of the diet principles there are wrong. I don't know if they're still doing the, was it paleo, where it's like, high protein, veggies, and some fats, not a lot of carbs. I mean, it makes no sense. That whole exercise of they do is glycolytic, and they're not eating carbs. Like, it makes absolutely no fucking sense. And so it's not something I demonize, but generally speaking, right. I get a lot of fallout from people that did CrossFit because that's the way they were taught to eat. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the day, it's a huge stress to the body, and they're overtraining, under eating, under fueling. and the body's it's gonna respond. It's gonna respond downward is what it's going to do. It's just a matter of time. How resilient are you? Some people might take a year. Some people might take 6 years, but it's going to happen. You got to be in a surplus if you're going to do shit like that. You got to have carbs in your body. You got to be well fed, and don't do it every damn day. And you got to periodize your training too. And I don't know. I haven't done enough CrossFit. I have done it for a couple weeks and didn't like it, but I gave it a chance. I don't know if periodization is taught. It might be. So anyone out there who's CrossFit, don't get mad at me. I don't know if it is. But yeah, that spin class, all those things are many things that come to me, and people have issues. But it happens in bodybuilding too, because
Absolutely.
it's low calorie, training 6-7 days a week. It's just going to take its toll, and it takes its toll faster on the female's body than it does the man's.
Yeah, that makes me wonder. Cause like I did CrossFit for 3 years. I did it 6 days a week. Definitely was in the paleo lifestyle, and I definitely drove myself into the ground. That was kind of pre-transition, so I'm wondering, I don't know when I recovered. Maybe it was not a transition because I got all the good hormones in me.
Testosterone and went more androgenic instead of being more your dominant hormone. You probably built some resiliency. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Otherwise, I was like, damn, I was tired. I don't know what I was thinking.
There you go. Example one.
Yeah. Which kind of leads off to, one topic that is recognized more so in the CrossFit community, ironically, is like adrenal fatigue, adrenal insufficiency, which isn't necessarily recognized in the medical community very much, which I don't really understand why they're so resistant to even really discussing it, outside of it being by the time you have symptoms, you're basically dead, those types. So I'm just kind of curious of your opinion of maybe why they don't like to acknowledge or recognize it, or, how to get help, from someone who actually can help you.
Yeah. I know the adrenal fatigue word is not recognized by the medical community. But like you said, adrenal insufficiency, you got to be almost dead for it to be a thing. And then, a lot of times they treat it with drugs. I don't quite know why, just like I don't quite know why most doctors only run TSH and T4 when T4's got to convert to free T3. And that's what runs your thyroid. I can't answer it. That's just how they teach it in medical school. I don't know what the agenda is there, because just think how it works. So why it's not recognized, I don't know. So I just don't use the word fatigue because I don't want to deal with some keyboard jackass. There's no such thing as adrenal fatigue. Well, listen, I can run a 4-point cortisol, and if you're a flatline or whatever the fuck you want to call it, you got problems, and that cortisol needs to come up. Let's just call it that way. So I don't know, man, but that's a big problem I see all the time. I just reviewed labs yesterday of a client. Cortisol was 6.8 in the morning. Should be 10 to 15 and really 12 to 15. So it's a thing, and then you got to look at your 4-point and see, is it just low in the morning, or are you just a damn flatliner? And that's harder to get up. The more flatlined it is, the harder it is. You got to rest. And someone who's in CrossFit isn't going to want to do that. And someone who's in bodybuilding generally don't want to do it either. But it's this is where you're at. This is where you put yourself. If you want to be able to lose fat, you got to have cortisol. And so, and you got to get your inflammation down. And when your cortisol is really low, you're inflamed, because cortisol lowers inflammation. It's not a bad hormone. It's just bad when it gets stuck, high, and you can't get out of that flight or fight. So yeah, I don't know why it's like that, but man, there's a lot of things in the medical that I don't quite understand. Why don't they run fasted insulin? That's the telltale sign if you truly have insulin sensitivity issues. Glucose in the morning could be not looking great, and the rest of the day you're good and your fasted insulin's good, and that's Dawn phenomenon. So I don't know why some of the things are done. I wish I knew, and I wish they would revamp the curriculum, but I don't see it happening.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I feel like it's even more so, learning from you and more about the functional side of things. It's created this minor to major mistrust of actual doctors. Cause I'm just it's they're not thorough. They just run off their little Rolodex of tests that they're going to run. And usually they're all the wrong ones, or ones that don't really matter. So
it all has to do with, because it's silo medicine. You know, you got your general practitioners. So what are they mainly good at? Well, if you got bronchitis, here's some antibiotics. You got a sore throat, here's some antibiotics, you know, and then you got your silo endocrinologist and you got this. And so they're only taught to kind of stay in their silo. And so you go to your GP and, I can't lose weight and I'm tired. You're probably are depressed. You know, here's a pill for it. They don't know. They're not taught this stuff. So it's not like we can be mad at them. And honestly, it's kind of good they aren't. I can practice functional nutrition because they don't have time to do that. You know what I mean? So, and I think as more and more people learn what functional nutrition is, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, most people will have some sort of health coach to go along with their doctor. Harvard now is teaching a nutrition course, like a more functional nutrition course. So that's adoption. You can now bill your insurance for health coach. Not that I want that because they aren't nickel and diming me, but that is adoption. That's saying, hey, this is legit. And you figure if you only got 12% of the population that knows about us, and now all these things are saying, hey, this is legit. That's a lot of people still that can come in and find us all. And so there's plenty of work if you're on the right side of the fence. I think if anyone's just only on the bodybuilding fence, you better be the top dog, because you know that you're fighting for a limited amount of clients. But if you're on the health coaching side, the functional side, we're just now heading this way. So I know everyone's like, oh, there's so many people. There's a lot of people out there that don't even know what the fuck we do. And once they do, you're like, oh shit, I can go get help and I don't have to wait for 9 weeks and I don't have to, be told, few little things in 15-minute appointments. Great. Let's go give this a roll. So that's kind of a rant and was off the target there. But I think that anyone on that side of the coin is in the right spot, and anyone who's not learning functional is probably better start.
Yeah. Do you ever deal with people kind of being like, what are your certifications? Are you allowed to, be coaching people with this? Or are people generally just like,
not really.
help, I'm fucked.
I've been in this thing for 15 years. I did go get certified with the functional doctor. I studied under him, went to Minnesota to do it. No one really has issues. I'm not diagnosing. I'm not trying to treat disease. I'm just trying to get your health back. So no one's really came at me with it. So
do you have do you have to struggle to try to get clients to understand that this shit takes time, that it's not an instant gratification? Because I know I deal with that quite a bit.
I don't, and that's no. But I think it's because the kind of clients I get, they're a little more sophisticated. Like I said, most of my clients have been in diet culture for a very long time. Every once in a while, of course, people want to know how long is this going to take, and I say, well, based on your forms, you have XYZ. In my experience, you're looking at 6 months to 9 months, but most people have an idea and understanding that this is going to take time. But I think, like I said, I get a little bit more sophisticated client. Either they've been in the competing world for a while, or they've been in the diet culture for a while. I think if you're dealing with newbies and younger people, that's going to be probably very difficult. My clientele is usually 35 to 60. So I think they're just a little more educated and kind of understand what they're getting into. And then I'm still very much referral based. So I think a lot of times that person has already said, hey, he looked at my labs, he flushed me, he rested me, he fed me up. We didn't really get into the cutting for 4, 5, 6 months. And then he did this, And so I think they kind of already have an idea coming to me. But I certainly think the younger demographic that someone deals with, especially if they have issues, number one, they're going to get pushed back because lab tests are expensive. And number two, they might just not understand and really want to listen. When we're younger, we think we know it all. And as we get older, we're willing to listen to experts and people that may know a little more than us. So I think that kind of all goes into it.
Yeah. Very true. Very true.
So gut health, that's something that I feel like also gets missed or is very misunderstood. So, even if you have any sort of gut issues, you go to the doctor, they literally hardly do anything besides stick a scope up your ass. So, what what are some signs, symptoms of people having some gut issues? What I know, GI mapping that like gastroenterologists don't even bother with or ever do, but it's also so insightful. And I'm just like, that's another thing I wonder, like, why don't they do these things? But also, so like, what is your usual approach or screening process? I know that MSQ is part of the gut thing, and you have a whole other form for that. But yeah, like, what is usually the process for that? What are some signs, symptoms that people might want to get a GI map done or something along those lines?
Sure. So it helps to kind of differentiate from like maybe just some sensitivities and or eating too many Franken foods versus truly having maybe some SIBO or gut dysbiosis. So, the SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And you can also just have dysbiosis where your commensals, your good bacteria, are either too high or too low. So you don't have to have an infection in the small intestine to have these issues. But basically, those types of things are going to be bloating all day. You know what I mean? So you wake up in the morning, you're going to be bloated. You drink water, you're going to be bloated. Every meal, you're going to be bloated. And it's almost pretty rapid and quick. You're probably going to have constipation or diarrhea or both nonstop. And that tends to tell me more that you have probably something going on in the gut that I need a GI map. There might be GERD, acid reflux going on with it, maybe even some pain, like inflammation. So you feel like kind of a little achy and pain after you eat. Now, when it's probably just more of a pancreatic enzyme, Franken food issue, sensitivity food issue, you might really not feel any of the bloat until maybe an hour later. That's when the food gets into the duodenum, and that's when you have more pancreatic enzymes coming at it. And if you're like depleted of pancreatic enzymes, not enough hydrochloric, that might take an hour or so to feel the bloat. And so to there, it's like, okay, maybe we need to add some just pancreatic, maybe some hydrochloric, maybe some ox bile, things like that to get the digestive tract supported with more digestive enzyme type products. So, and other low hanging fruit is, like I said, Franken foods. Are they eating a lot of protein bars? Are they eating a lot of Splenda? All those things can bloat people. So we want to pull those things out. So those are like some things you want to look at right away. Are they getting enough fiber? Maybe that's causing the constipation. If there's no other issues, there's no real bloat, there's no real pains in the stomach, no real bad gas. Maybe they just aren't hitting their fiber amounts. So we get more fruit, we get more veggies, we maybe even supplement with fiber. So it's really about kind of getting that low hanging fruit out of the way. If it's kind of a bloat that's just happening an hour or two later, or maybe just a few meals. But if it's all day, every day, then you look pregnant, you want to go ahead and get a GI map. What's going to happen probably is you go to the doctor, they're going to tell you have IBS and send you home usually with Linz-Nez, Linznes, Linz-Nez, something like that. And that's it. Like, you have IBS and here's this, and it'll kind of help you, and that's it. But 95% of the times when people tell me they have IBS and I run a GI map, they've got dysbiosis and or SIBO or both. And so if we get in there with a 5R program and really rest them and, ease up on the gut, fish, things are easy to digest, and run a 5R program with some killers and proper digestive enzymes, biofilm removers, all those things, we can get a really good result and get them back to doing the things they love. So that's kind of, I think that's pretty good spiel on digestion there.
Yeah, it's just so crazy to me, like the disconnect, because like I have a friend who went to the doctor, was having some gut issues, and they said IBS, just like you said, and they prescribed them medicine that was $600 with insurance a month.
Yeah.
They're like, well, I guess I'm just going to have IBS and not treat it. And it's just so crazy to me, because like, I feel like Western medicine just does it. They just want to throw a pill at it as opposed to look at any lifestyle issues, because it's a little more tricky or a little harder.
It takes way more time. You can't do that in 15 minutes.
Right. And it's just so frustrating to me, because, and I'm glad people out there like you, Jason, exist, just because like otherwise it just wouldn't be any help for anybody.
Yeah. And, seriously, I always say, like, doctors have great points and things that
Absolutely.
they do. It's just a lot of these lifestyle things that really fit more inside, what a functional nutritionist can provide. So, we all have our strong points and our things that we can't do. Obviously, I can't get cancer away from someone, and, plenty of other things. If you're in a car wreck, I can't help you. But if you're suffering from a lifestyle type issue or disease, I certainly can. Probably better than your GP or your doctor, your silo doctor can.
Absolutely. What are some things that you've had to kind of, let me rephrase the question. When it comes to diet culture and all this bullshit that's put out on the popular media, what would you say, like someone who just doesn't want to fall for that? How would you kind of help them pull out the good information and leave the bullshit behind?
Well, I think it's hard at first because they're not educated on it, and they're trying, but so they're listening to the wrong outlets generally, I would say, and this doesn't always mean it either, but figure out the people that have the clients that have the issues you have, and then see what they're putting out, and then research it yourself. So if you think you have weight loss resistance, come to my Instagram page, read about the women I'm helping, then go and research it yourself. Does it make sense? Does it seem logical? If it doesn't, leave it. If it does, dig in more. Maybe you contact that person for help. Maybe you read more of their page and try to piece it together yourself. But I think you need to find people that are in the trenches doing it, and they deal with people that have your same issues. Listening to the media, listening to just some talking head that really can't show you the clients that they've helped is pretty much the wrong way to go about it. A lot of things that we see on TV and things like that are meant to sell stories and be sensationalized. And so, it's just not probably the smartest place to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, it sounds about right. I feel like it's like there's a lot of crazy things that go on TikTok or people walk away with and come to me with. I'm just like, no, please stop.
If you listen to the media, every person's bad, and every, demographic is bad, and let's make everyone hate each other. I don't really even watch the news for that reason. But if I was in someone's shoes and I wanted nutrition advice, I would certainly find people that had the clients that had my issues, and then read what they're putting out, and then research it, and not even take their word for it, but then research it. Does it make sense? Does it stand true? That's how I would go about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And that leads me to one thing that's kind of a hot topic that people talk about a lot, but is, I feel like, kind of misunderstood, is things like insulin resistance. What is insulin? Like, what effect does it have on the body? Why does, insulin sensitivity matter, and things like that? I think that tends to confuse people. So if you can kind of give a little feel on that.
First and foremost, insulin's a storage hormone. So it's going to help your body store glycogen for energy. It's also going to store fat. It's not selective. People think if they only eat so many carbs, it's going to all go to the muscle. It doesn't. We are built to survive. So every little bit of meal we eat gets pushed some to fat. But the more insulin sensitive you are, the more you're going to store in the muscle and away from fat. The less sensitive you are, the more you're going to store towards the other direction. And so things like training increase insulin sensitivity, eating a healthy diet, good anti-inflammatory fats, because keeping inflammation down is going to make your body more sensitive. So one of the analogies I give is, think of insulin as like a key, and it opens the cell membrane. So it unlocks the lock to the cell. And when this happens, GLUT4 translocates up to the cell membrane, and that allows glycogen to sit and be seated and stored in this muscle cell. Okay. If this key can't unlock, then all these sugars keep circulating in the bloodstream. Okay. And as that happens, if you stay like that too long, you become type 2 diabetic. You'll have non-fatty alcoholic liver disease. It's a mouthful. And you're going to be pushing triglycerides all around your liver. And so this is called metabolic syndrome. The metabolic syndrome is a very intense case of insulin resistance. Your insulin is no longer signaling to the cells. So you want to improve and always restore and keep your sensitivity. Training does that. Eating well does that. You can take certain supplements like berberine. We have a GDA Max with New Ethics that'll help sensitize it. What else can you do? Go into a deficit every once in a while. A deficit isn't bad. Diet variety is actually very good for our systems. If you think about the old times, our ancestors, certain seasons they'd hunt and meat was plentiful. And then certain seasons they had no meat and maybe they're eating grubs and, the bark off of a tree. So they're feasting and famine. And so there's not a problem with being in a deficit occasionally. It's just, we going back to metabolic resistance or weight loss resistance, people stay in it too long, but both are good, surplus, deficit. So doing that occasionally will reset your insulin sensitivity by being in a deficit because you're burning up the sugars more and more. And that's going to reset insulin sensitivity. So it's a very important tool to understand how to use. I recommend tracking with a glucometer at home. You can take your morning. That should be between 80 and 90. You can take your postprandials, and that means about every 2.5 hours to 3 hours after you have eaten. That should be back down to close to what your baseline was in the morning. And that'll mean you have pretty good insulin sensitivity. If you're running 120s after every meal, 2-3 hours later, you've probably faded some, and you can benefit from maybe a short stint in a deficit to reset that. So you can kind of watch it at home. But the more sensitive you stay, the more muscle you're going to build. The less sensitive, the more fat you're going to store. And if you become resistant, then you're going to head down the metabolic syndrome stage with type 2 and the fatty liver disease and all those things. So
that sounds not so fun.
And
what? Yeah. So the best way to prevent that, it sounds, is going to be, diet, lifestyle factors, which I guess is kind of, another reason it's so important even for bodybuilders to, make sure that you're not just getting all your calories through, shit food, sugar and all that stuff. Cause it sounds like it might potentially hinder your gains.
Yeah. And high cortisol will cause insulin resistance as well. So if cortisol is too high, you're inflamed as well. And that can cause insulin insensitivity. Poor sleep will cause it. So you got to sleep well. All these things will add up over time. So stress can cause it as well. And then not sleeping as well. So a lot of things have to be right. And you gotta really get all those lifestyle factors dialed in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Bye-bye to the dirty bulk.
Yeah. No idea. Unless you're one of those people that are super insulin sensitive, and I have a few of them, and they just stay in good numbers and they really don't pack on fat. But if you're someone who starts to fade and you get fat fast, and one of the easiest ways to know you're losing sensitivity is when you aren't getting a pump anymore in your training.
That's crazy, because it's if you're overfed, you don't get a pump very well, but if you're underfed, you don't get a pump very well either.
Well, being in an overfed state for a few weeks, you will get a pump, but eventually you'll fade. If you're like 90% of the public, you'll fade. You'll start to push high blood sugar numbers, the insulin sensitivity goes away, and so you will start to lose your pump. And the longer you live that way, the worse it'll get, and then you'll start losing muscle.
Yes.
Can we talk a little bit about sleep and how these different kind of hormones and play a role in getting shitty sleep? Because
Sure.
I know that is a big one for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, a lot of people, my clients, there's going to be two drivers for poor sleep mainly. One is going to be high cortisol, so stress. So as your cortisol spiking at night, you can have flip circadian rhythms where it should be lowering at night, but you're spiking. Maybe there's something going on in your life where the stress hits around 5, 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. maybe you're in a bad relationship or something, and that's when the person gets off work, and so your shit's just spiking and you can't sleep. So cortisol stress is definitely one. Another one in the female demographic is low progesterone, which basically goes along hand in hand with stress. But having low progesterone is going to make you more estrogen dominant, and that's going to cause anxiety as that what's it called? Dopamine is not kept in check, and that's going to be a problem. You could have potential GABA, serotonin issues. That helps calm the body. So, you could have neurotransmitter issues. And the only way you're really going to know is take like a neurotransmitter test. I don't generally go down that route a ton. I have. I've taken it on myself as well. I literally had almost no serotonin and no GABA. I was all gas and no brake. And some people are built that way. You'll be successful in life, but you're definitely going to have other issues.
Yeah.
And so that can affect sleep. So neurotransmitters, progesterone, cortisol, I think those are some of your main drivers. And progesterone and cortisol go hand in hand with just stress of life. And so lifestyle changes usually need to be made.
Yeah, I know. After Cody's suggestion, started taking the sleep supplements from you, from Nutrigen, and man, never had better sleep. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I did the Cordys and maybe the Relax from us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Those are. I mean, I take those year round. I used to have an Aura ring, and man, I would get, even on a 6-hour night, I would still get an hour of REM and deep, and usually it takes most people 8 hours to get that. So you could do more on less, and I definitely feel more rested. So there's many nights I only get about 6 hours. So those are a staple in mine. And just so you know, that Relax is spiking GABA, and so is the Cordys with the L-theanine. So you're playing on that GABA receptor, which is also played on with liquor.
Yeah.
You get that GABA coming up, and that relaxes you.
I just know that was like a miracle drug for me when I was having shitty sleep.
So, yeah, I was like, this works for me. Here, you gotta take this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think what was I gonna, oh yeah. So as far as like hormones go with women, there's one thing that I forgot to ask, but there's like things like PCOS that causes a lot of issue, and then there's also people might have both, but things like PMDD, where like people have really bad PMS symptoms. Do you think that's like just like a hormone imbalance that can be fixed, or do you think that's kind of a permanent thing? It just is kind of someone drawing the short straw in life, or I'm curious.
So I don't deal with PMDD a lot, but I have some, and I believe it's twofold. I believe it's the hormonal change, but I also believe there's neurotransmitter issues going on. I believe serotonin is probably either already low in those people or it's being driven low. So I think PMDD, one of the best ways to handle it, if you want to handle it naturally, is like 5-HTP around the time that it's starting to hit. And then maybe like some estrocort, so you're keeping the estrogen from building up too much, because you'll have an estrogen spike, you have a little progesterone spike, and I believe it's more that estrogen mixed with just a lower serotonin profile overall. Because a lot of times with PMDD, they'll try to solve it with like Prozac, and all that's doing is it's an SSRI, so it's bringing that serotonin back up, keeping it up higher. So 5-HTP is a natural supplement that you can use to do that as well. So you could get that a closer effect if you use 5-HTP, and then definitely do something to keep estrogen moving out of the body as well. So, and I would also check your progesterone. I mean, if your progesterone is not spiking well, then you're definitely estrogen dominant. You might want a little chaseberry with the estrocort plus the 5-HTP. But I think that you could handle it. Now, if you're really, really bad, you may need the Prozacs or the Lexapros, but I think it's a combination.
Interesting. Yeah, good to know. So as far as 5-HTP, sorry, I am dumb, but what is this and where can you find it?
It's an amino acid, and you can find it pretty much anywhere. I know Nutridyne makes one, but you would take probably about 200 mgs. You could try it morning and midday and night. Might be too much for you. It might drive your serotonin too high and you're like, falling asleep. You could try 100 mgs 3 times a day. I mean, you can play with the dose, but somewhere around there was probably where I would land.
Gotcha. Cool. Good to know. As far as PCOS, I know that one is, by definition, people usually think it means, you have to have cysts to be diagnosed, but I know, that's not the case. So can you kind of fill us in a little bit on what PCOS is?
So you can have cysts with PCOS, but you don't have to have cysts to have PCOS. And they really have talked about renaming it as far as I have heard. What you're going to have with PCOS, it's a lifestyle disease for sure. Now you're genetically coded, but your lifestyle is pulling the trigger for sure. Inflammation and stress are going to be the main drivers. But basically on labs, what you're going to see is hyperandrogenism. So people with PCOS are going to have hirsutism, some body hairs growing where they don't want. They might have hair thinning. They might have acne. Pretty much any symptoms, oily skin that you could get from being hyperandrogenism, for having hyperandrogenism. So that's going to be one thing. And then what's the driver? It could be inflammatory PCOS. So your CRP is high. You got some inflammation. It could be adrenal PCOS. So your cortisol is high, or your cortisol is flatline, which means you spent a year or two high and that cranked it. And now, even though it's low, you still got that hyperandrogenism from the time when that cortisol was high. You could have insulin resistant PCOS, and that's one of the most prevalent, but that's gonna be more prevalent in your gen pop who are overweight. So the other two are more a lean PCOS. It's from too much activity, right? But your insulin resistant PCOS, which is probably going to make up most of the cases if you work with the gen pop, they're going to be usually overweight and it's insulin resistant. So you're going to see high fasted insulin. 10 or higher with hyperandrogenism is going to be a problem. And your listeners might be saying, well, what's hyperandrogenism? Well, in labs, it'd be high testosterone without taking testosterone. It'd be high free test without taking testosterone. Your DHEA could be marked high. That's another androgen. Now, those are the main ones that you see on serum. You could be on a Dutch test and their acetylcholinone could be high, their androsterone could be high, androstenedione could be high, and you could see that on a Dutch test. So those are even further downstream androgens that we don't usually run in serum. But yeah, that's generally what it is. So, I mean, you've got to get the stress, you got to deal with the stress, you got to deal with the inflammation, and you got to put them on a better diet. So Mediterranean's awesome for lowering inflammation. Lots of anti-inflammatory oils, fish, berries, fruits, veggies. Maybe you need a GDA max like New Ethics. It's going to improve the insulin sensitivity if they have that type driven. But you really got to find the root cause. And that's where the labs come in and you got to know what you're looking for. So
it's one of those more complicated ones I feel like to figure out. So as far as the Dutch test goes, can you kind of explain a little bit of what that might entail or like what you might be able to read off of that? It's just one of those things I think a lot of people aren't very familiar with.
Yeah, it's a dry urine test for hormones. You can do it at home. My clinic, I own an HRT clinic. We can get them to you at a pretty good price. And basically it just allows you to see the metabolites of hormones. They're going to have your sex hormones, progesterone, estradiol, testosterone. It's going to have a 4-point cortisol curve, which is really nice. So you can really check how their stress is rather than just having a single point in the morning on serum. And then it's going to tell you how they bias their estrogen metabolism. So if you go down 2-OH, that's the most protective pathway and least cancerous. If you go down the 4-OH, that's the worst. And that is generally people who have more incidence of, estrogen-driven cancers, uterine, breast, all those things. So, I always say if I had a female daughter, I would be giving them a Dutch test as soon as they hit puberty to see how they bias their estrogen. If they're going down the dangerous pathway, all you got to do is use DIM 200 mg for life or our Estracort, and it'll push you more towards the 2-OH, which is the protective pathway. So it's very cool that it shows that. It shows how well you methylate or how well you don't methylate. It shows your testosterone breakdown. Are you more 5-beta or are you more 5-alpha? 5-alpha is the more DHT driven. So if you have more DHT, you're going to be more prone to balding, more body hair, probably a thicker beard. And, women can be prone to the 5A. And if they go on androgens, they might then see hair thinning. You can use saw palmetto to try to block that, or like finasteride. But at the end of the day, if that's where you're coded, and they're using PEDs or something, they might see hair thinning. So you can kind of get a read on it if that's worth their risk. And then it's got some organic oats, which are like, some vitamins and minerals and things that you might be depleted in, like B6, B12, glutathione, things like that. So it's a pretty nice test. The one thing is it's more expensive. And then the other thing is there's no thyroid values. So if you're going to lead with that, you're going to have them also go give blood just to get their thyroid panels. So for me, I generally use serum. You can get a really good one for $200 at our clinic, Advanced Vitality. And, it's got most what I need. I usually use the Dutch if I'm struggling in a case and I want to see like, man, why is this hair still thinning? Or, are they methylating well? Like how are things going there? So then I might get a Dutch, but if I'm not struggling with the case, I generally just stick to serum. But like I said, you could have another guy on who does functional or gal, and they might be like, no, I'm all Dutch. And then I send them off to do thyroid. It's great. Whatever your clients can afford. But, a Dutch is going to cost you about $400. Then that thyroid panel is going to cost you probably another $75, where I can get a pretty damn good idea what's going on for a $200 serum panel. So
awesome.
Makes sense. I don't think I have any other questions.
Yeah. We've had you almost kept you for an hour now, so I guess we should probably let you go. But are there any last things that you want to touch on before we go?
No, if you need help with anything that we talked about, you can always reach out. I'm ScoobyPrep1_IFBB Pro on Instagram, or if that's a pain in the ass to try to remember, just Jason at ScoobyPrep.com. You can reach out anytime. I am accepting clients, but I also have a lot of coaches under me who are as well. So if my prices don't work or I am not at that point, I will certainly give you some options of what you can do.
Awesome.
Got it.
Cool.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming on. And
Sure.
Appreciate your time. So,
Yep.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
All right. Bye.